Now what you want to do is look at three documents which I have posted for you. One of them is the original agreement of February 11th, 1937 between the new United Auto Workers and the General Motors Corporation. The second one is a decision by Harry Shulman referring to the authority of Ford supervision, and I'll explain that in just a minute. And then the third is a great anecdote which an officer of a Baltimore Teamster local told to me many years ago. And I've used it in the classes as an example of how workers in other areas deal with workplace problems. So if you look at the UAW-GM agreement, this came after a 44-day sit-down strike. And if you think you've had tough situations in your locals with your employers, nothing like General Motors. Because General Motors in the 1930s had said, despite the rise of unionism in a lot of the industry in the 30s, that they would never, ever recognize a union among the auto workers. And so on December 30th, 1936, when it looked like the Flint, Michigan shop was going to be moving some dies out of the area to avoid the union, the workers seized the plant and sat in for 44 days. That is, they locked the company out. If you want to see great videos, you can go online and see the documentaries about the sit-down strike. And finally, on February 11th, 1937, you got a contract which covered tens of thousands of workers, but it is one page. And many of us are used to contracts now which have hundreds of pages, hundreds, dozens of clauses. What I want to show you is this agreement simply gave the recognition to the auto workers by General Motors. And everything else, they were going to fight it out. And so they did it on the basis of work stoppages and strength. And everybody belonged. There was no union shop at this time. And so the steward would go around to every worker and collect dues every week. And if you paid up, you had a pin and you wore your pin. And woe be to the worker who didn't have that pin, because they knew, and they had learned from unions from the early days, that unless you have 100% membership, you're not going to be successfully able to deal with the employer. But this was an agreement which didn't have a grievance procedure, it didn't have arbitration, it didn't have a lot of contract language. And yes, it led to certain confusions and conflict among the members, but it was basically saying, we are the union, we are going to deal with everything on the workplace. And the histories of the UAW will even talk about how the workers would argue about a supervisor. And a steward would come in, and if a supervisor was a mean SOB, the steward would say to the supervisor, we don't want you in here anymore. And the supervisor would say, well, that's not your decision, it's GM's decision. And the steward would say, fine, nobody's going to work until you're gone. And that's how they bargained. And they bargained successfully. And what has happened over the last 70 years, companies have taken this power away from us. One of the most important parts of it is this decision by Harry Shulman. And you don't have the whole decision, but you do have the arbitration award by Mr. Heekin about a discharge case. You'll find some colorful language in there, which a worker says to the boss, you're a spineless bastard and you can kiss my balls. But what arbitrator Harry Shulman did in 1944 was to establish the policy of work, then grieve. And he had a decision over workers who were fired at Ford for conducting a work stoppage, which was exactly what they were used to doing. And he laid out, and you will see it quoted in Mr. Heekin's decision, that civilized labor relations means the management's got to run the place and the workers have to appeal that decision through civilized channels, which is the grievance procedure. And so what we have today are grievances that will go on for years and not get held. But this Harry Shulman decision dramatically changed it. And you need to know what it is for the history of grievances and how we got where we are. As I said, the third story is told by Kevin McDermott. He's back in Ireland visiting someone, and it's a great story you'll see about you can have your arbitration clause, give me my whistle. And I won't tell you any more than that other than to go read the little story that he wrote. This is the last thing I'm going to show you. as far as the organizing model goes. The servicing model is based on someone else. And Saul Schneiderman, who is an officer at the Library of Congress, gave this to me 10 years ago. It's an obituary for someone else. And so you can read this, and you'll know that when someone else was there, everything was great. But now someone else is gone because someone else was going to take care of the situation. What we see in the organizing model is that you are going to take care of the situation. Your coworkers are going to take care of the situation. Your families, your riders, your community, your political allies are going to take care of the situation because someone else is not here anymore. So what you have to do then is to be proactive. And this is something I'm going to stress, that you have to look for opportunities to build the union. Too many union stewards and officers just wait for something to happen. That is, nothing goes on, you go to work, and unless a member comes up to you with a problem, you don't have to do anything. Being proactive means that you look to create grievances. And we'll talk about this a little bit later, but are there issues in your workplace that all your members are upset about? And can you use these to organize a movement within there? Proactively means informing your members about pending grievances. And you can do it on an app, you can do it on a web page, you can do it as a text message, you can do it as a workplace newsletter. You don't necessarily have to give personal details of every grievance, but your members need to know that the union is there 7/24/365, and that any grievance is there not to defend an individual, but to defend the contract as a whole. Part of being proactive is publicizing the victories, because everybody thinks the union just gets their ass kicked all the time. That's not true. We sometimes win. And when you win and you publicize that victory, you then encourage people to try and do it again. You don't necessarily gloat, but you want to emphasize that it is possible. If we organize properly, we can make that boss do what he doesn't want to do. And this is what the magic word that I use called leverage. Leverage is that ability, as you will see in the next slides, to make that company do what they don't want to do. Settle grievances, pay wages, provide benefits that are more than what they want to do. And so finally, part of being proactive, think new thoughts. Rethink everything you do. Many of us who are stewards just follow along. We saw what a steward had done before, and we figure, well, we'll just keep doing that. Not possible. The world has changed, as we saw in the first session. And if we don't change, we're not going to be here. Our unions are going to be weak, and our members are going to be unhappy. And that's not what we want to do. So, as a steward, my suggestion is you do this. You may have to do it at home, is you have a to-do list. And many of us have a reactive to-do list. That is, a member comes up to us and says, I don't think I got paid properly for my overtime, or I didn't get awarded a bid on a particular job, and you write it down. You say, I'm going to have to investigate this grievance, and I write it down to make sure I don't forget. And we're going to talk later about a Stewards Toolkit, but you should have a separate briefcase or note bag where you keep your union materials. And you keep your contract and your bylaws and your fact sheets and your grievance forms, contact phone numbers, things like that. But keep two paths. One is a to-do list for reactive things, but the other is proactive. What can I do today to build the union and make it stronger in my workplace? Can I set up a communications network? Can I sign up some non-members? Can I reach out to my riders? Can I talk to some politician that I can go to for help? Can I talk to people in the community? These are all areas that we need to do proactively before we get into a crisis civilization. So these are kinds of things that are very, very important to do. So this will kind of summarize the questions for you as a union steward. How do you operate in these structures? Are you proactive or are you reactive? Do you have a narrow reading of the union contract that is minimizing our power in the workplace? Are you afraid of management? Are you not willing to make tough decisions? And do you not keep getting new information? So we're going to take a break now, and then we're going to come back and talk about leverage.